try to be the voice of the wind industry globally because everyone knows about solar really. You know what a solar panel looks like, you know how to get solar on your roofs, but wind is not as well known as solar. So we also have a big mandate. So we were at 6 gigawatts. Now we're at 10 gigawatts. For any of the larger markets in the world, the 10 gigawatt mark, it's an inflection point. It's like a hockey stick. So now you start really seeing scaling up of the technology. And so I'm very proud that Africa has gotten to 10 gigawatts. But we have a lot of work to do. I think we're still at 0.01% of the total capacity that can be installed. And so we still have lots of policy to put in place, lots of investment, financing to come into play. And I think that would be really what catalyzes the wind sector.
You feel it when you drive on the highway. It brushes against your face on the beach. You take cover when it picks up speed. What is this? Wind. And Africa has a lot of it. Strong and consistent wind. The kind that could generate serious energy. And yet, nobody is using it. Solar gets all the hype and the attention. Wind turbines. Where are they? You barely see any of them. Engineer Wangari has been working on this problem for years, trying to figure out why Africa keeps ignoring a resource that's literally everywhere. She joined us back in 2023 to talk about it, and we're bringing her back to discuss the problem that still stands. Why aren't we building more wind farms? I am Emeka Okpukpara, and this is Connecting the Dots. Wangari, how are you doing?
I am fantastic, Emeka. Thank you so much for having me.
Last year, you took 70 flights. This year, how many are you going to take?
This is my first flight of the year. So Abuja is where the heart is, I would say, and great to open the year here. Also great to see the family here at Nextier, new offices and all that. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. What I think about when we first met in DC, that was what, 4 years ago, right?
4 already.
It must have been 2021, right?
Yes.
2021. Yeah, it was 2021.
Yeah. That's 5 years.
5 years. Wow. A lot has changed. And then what was that? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I had you on the podcast around wind and around what it would mean for the energy sector in Africa. I'm still very optimistic, but maybe with what I know now, I see where there could be some challenges. But from your perspective as the director of Africa for GWEC, what has changed?
So first of all, it's crazy that it's been 5 years since we met in Washington and discussed potentially having a Nigeria Wind Energy Council, potentially setting this up. And look at how far we've come. We've already done so much within the industry. We already have a lot of support from, great, partners like UNDP and the EU, GWEC and others. So it's great to see that collaboration has gone far in the last 5 years. And in the last 2 specifically, from when we actually started actioning what we discussed in Washington, we've seen a lot of progress, including the NCCC also signed the wind blueprint and a few others. A board formed, people talking about wind. I mean, for me, it's actually a full circle moment because I remember talking about wind and people saying there's no wind in Nigeria to presenting, a few months ago to the Lagos state government and to some of the team around what wind could possibly do for Lagos state. So it's great to see that there's wind is now starting to be embraced in Nigeria. And I think, we have a long way to go, but I can't wait till we have the first, megawatts of wind on the grid, till we're powering the first productive use. We're doing, wind cooling, wind irrigation. I think there's a lot to come and I'm looking forward to that.
That's so important given the energy transition conversation and given the fact that you have the continent without power. And it's really important to be very innovative. So I'm glad wind is something that we're all looking into. But there's always a geographical comparison between East
Mhm.
and West,
Yes.
right? And West Africa seems to be a little slower in
Mhm.
adopting wind.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I should be asking you. You're the West African. I think one of the
Or
things,
maybe what did you guys do in East Africa
right?
to create that market?
Yeah. One of the things that happened many, many years ago, I want to say in the early 90s, is we had a body, in Kenya, which did a lot of research on different renewable energy sources. So
Mm,
geothermal, wind, solar. And from that, the first wind turbine that went up in Kenya was in 1993 in the Gong,
1993.
1993 in the Gong Hills Wind Farm.
Mm,
And so one of the things that was really a catalyst for wind in Kenya is that because we had such early exposure to wind such a long time ago, all the wind farms and I think now we have 415 megawatts on the grid, which is 15% of Kenya's grid with wind, is because that development, that research, and that embracing of the technology has come over time. Now, I know there was also a lot of early work done in Nigeria in places like Katsina, where we have the 10 megawatt wind farm. And, of course, for various, issues and challenges, the wind farm, yes, is up, but is only producing less than 1 megawatt of wind. And so, of course, there have been certain challenges that come with that. One of the things that I would say that has really been interesting for Kenya is that we have a lot of the financial sector driving our investment in energy. And when you think of the people really investing in wind farms, across the continent, it's the DFIs, it's the European DFIs, it's really foreign investment coming into the continent. And so that has naturally been easier in the energy sector in places like Kenya. Now, in other places like Ethiopia, where they also have about 250 megawatts or more in development, that's been purely driven by policy from the government. And so the government has seen that they have fantastic wind resource. They have also hydro, so they're complementing the two. And that's giving them very, very cheap power at about 6 cents a kilowatt hour, to the point where the rest of the East African power pool is importing from them.
yeah.
And so that has also been a catalyst in that country. In South Africa, the catalyst was policy, the REAP, which is a way to procure renewables under the different bid windows. And up until bid window 5, wind was really, well procured within those sectors. Apart from 6 and 7, unfortunately, we've not had wind in the last two. But there was already policy that was clear on how to procure wind. So where the markets have really succeeded in wind, the policy has really gone beforehand to help
Okay.
catalyze the sectors. I think in West Africa, that's not really the case yet. I think it's now coming to that point. Things like the wind energy blueprint, things like what the EU is doing in terms of policy and advocacy around renewables, the Electricity Act that was just launched as well, is really starting to get people thinking around different technologies, and so that is really going to enable more renewable energy coming on the grid here.
That's such an interesting point of view because the power sector completely changed
Hmm.
once the policy changed
Changed exactly.
in Nigeria to privatize it. So that's a good reference point. And just for our audience, in West Africa, the biggest wind farm is the one in
In
Senegal.
Senegal,
Senegal,
yes.
right?
Yeah, the Taibande wind farm, which is 120 megawatts. It's actually it's cutting edge. It's the only operational wind farm in West Africa. And it's one we're really proud of as GWEC because it's the first really showcasing wind in the West African region.
Sorry, I jumped to this. Could you tell the audience what GWEC does, just so we
Yes.
understand a little bit of the framing?
Yeah, so GWEC is the Global Industry Association for Wind. We basically are the voice of wind across the world. Everybody who manufactures, anybody who develops, anyone who does anything to do with wind in terms of providing a service to the wind industry is our member. We have, over, hundreds of members, and we speak with one voice to different stakeholders, whether it's governments, whether it's investors, whether it's policymakers. We really try to be the voice of the wind industry globally. And I mean, it's a big position to hold because, renewables are really scaling fast.
Mhm.
But the bigger question around wind is because everyone knows about solar, really. You know what a solar panel looks like, you know how to get solar on your roofs, but wind is not as well known as solar. So we also have a big mandate to educate the industry and to educate people around wind energy as well.
Interesting. And I think it's very important that our audience understands that GWEC is not only pitching about wind, that you're very collaborative
Mhm.
with other associations to ensure that the work they do, you're able to do it together. So there's a larger organization.
Mhm.
I'm losing track of the name.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I think one of the key things is that renewables can't speak, in silos. Yeah, you can't say solar says this, wind says this, hydro says this. You all need to come together and say, this is what the renewables industry says. And so in honestly, 2022, we realized that the collective voice of all the technologies is more important. And so we joined together with the Global Solar Council, the International Hydropower Association, the International Geothermal Association, the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, and the Green Hydrogen Organization. So all six technologies coming together under one umbrella called the Global Renewables Alliance. And so I also head up the Africa team of the
Yes.
Global Renewables Alliance. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. When capacity in the continent is 30,000 gigawatts plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you now look for what's actually being
Installed.
installed, it's less than 1%.
Less than 0.01%, right? Actually, when I started in this role, which was about 5 years ago, wind was at six. So we were at 6 gigawatts. Now we're at 10 gigawatts. And for any of the large markets in the world, whether it's India, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Europe, the 10 gigawatt mark, it's an inflection point. It's like a hockey stick. So now you start really seeing scaling up of the technology. And so I'm very proud that Africa has gotten to 10 gigawatts, but we have a lot of work to do. I think we're still at 0.01% of the total capacity that can be installed. And so we still have lots of policy to put in place, lots of investment and financing to come into play. And I think that would be really what catalyzes the wind sector.
And also, I think there's this confusion, or there's this turf war
Mm.
between solar and wind. And
No, Emeka, we love each other.
that's the perception. So
Yes.
GRE has disproved that.
Mm.
But for the average person, they're thinking solar is better. I can see the sun. It's predictable. Um, what, as a wind pioneer, as a wind advocate,
Mm.
educate the audience how both of those could potentially work together.
So wind and solar are very complementary. As you know, obviously solar is better during the day where the sun is shining. But a lot of people don't know that when the sun sets, wind actually ramps up.
Mhm.
Many places around the world, the wind is better at night. So when you want to have a renewable energy mix, you want to mix the two technologies together to enable you to have a better, to use a smaller battery in the bridge between solar and wind. In addition to that, a lot of people don't know that wind and hydropower are complementary. So when there's less rainfall, there's more wind. When there's more rainfall, there's less wind, right? So they're also complementary in that nature. And so wind also works really well with hydro. It works well with solar, as we've already said. And so it really is not about which technology is better, but it's about how to use this energy mix to really create a robust grid. In addition to that, I think one of the things that seems to get missed a lot is when you look at the capacity factors of wind. One wind farm, like in Kenya, Lake Turkana, capacity factors are above 65%. Solar capacity factors are about 28%. So for every megawatt installed, you're getting 65% in kilowatt hours out into the grid when it's wind. It's not saying that wind is better, but it's saying that there are different uses completely. There are different applications. Even when you look at things like providing auxiliary services to grids, such as inertia on the grid, wind can do that because it has a motor, it has a gearbox, whereas solar can't do that, right? So there's different applications for wind and solar. I think we need all of them in every grid. And so it's not really which is better, but what portions to use each, depending on which country you're in.
So they have different use cases.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, something you said, we probably need a little bit of clarity on.
Mhm.
Some of us didn't finish school, so what does capacity factor mean?
So a capacity factor is when you have like 1 megawatt of an energy system installed. When that system is running, the number of kilowatts it produces is certain percentage of what's totally installed. So a kilowatt is the amount of energy it's meant to produce per hour. Now, in solar, because the sun only shines 8 hours a day, the capacity factors are about 25 to 30%. So in 1 megawatt, over the course of a day, 24 hours, you only get 25% of the energy being produced during those 8 hours. Because wind blows at any time, most of the capacity factors for wind are about 60%, which means wind can be produced up to 16 or 18 hours a day from 1 megawatt installed as well. So when you look at the actual kilowatt hours, so the electrons coming out of the system, you have a lot more from 1 megawatt installed of wind than 1 megawatt installed of solar.
So just to draw the parallels, capacity factor of a gas turbine is very close to 1, right?
Yes.
Because it's running at all times.
It's running all the time. Exactly.
And then given in Nigeria, the hydro space wouldn't be closer to 1 because
Maybe
of
95%
rainy
or
season
90.
and all
True.
of
Okay,
that
yeah.
as well.
Depending on the plant, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So wind is actually almost more than double of solar.
More than double the solar. Yeah.
That's
Per
interesting.
megawatt installed, you get more than double the electrons out of the system.
So
In some cases, of course.
what makes this advocacy so difficult to do?
One of the things that has been quite challenging is that it's not as modular as solar. So what happens is when you are installing a wind farm, one turbine can be 6 megawatts. One onshore turbine, not even an offshore turbine. An offshore turbine can be 12 megawatts for one. And so it's quite an investment. It's a large upfront capital cost. We're talking millions of dollars here. And so when you look at solar, you can buy one panel and put one panel on the roof and you have energy, right? That's not really the case. I mean, there is small wind, which exists, and you can have small turbines as small as 400 watts, but it's not the case everywhere. So what happens is because you need such a large upfront capital cost for wind, you find that people find that a challenge. So that the cost of that can be an issue. But the second thing that people don't know about wind is for you to get a bankable project, you actually need to measure the wind for 12 months over the different seasons in one place. So if you know a place has wind, it might have wind during Harmattan season. When it's off on Harmattan season, it doesn't have wind. You need to make sure that that whole year of data is collected, and that's what makes a bankable project. So if I'm a developer, most times I will not want to take the 12 months to do the measurement, and therefore I'll go solar. And that sometimes is also one of the challenges that we face within wind. And I think with NWEC, one of the things we're doing to troubleshoot that is to say, can we do a study upfront that collects the data and then we do a roadshow to private sector players who then will already have the bankable data upfront and they don't have to spend 12 months collecting it.
One thing I think we've actually forgotten to do is to give NWEC a shout out, right?
Yes.
NWEC is the Nigeria Wind Energy Council run by Barrister Omi, and Wangari and I both sit on the board. NWEC is really on a journey to ensure that we get more wind, because we've got Katsina, right?
Yes.
We get more wind into the power sector in Nigeria. And it's really around, like you said, policy and ensuring that policies speak to what you're trying to do. And one aspect of that this government has been very focused on doing is creating a power policy.
Yep.
And the Nextier team has been very involved in that process to ensure that renewables are part of that conversation through advocacy work from NWEC and from other stakeholders. So I think we are going to get there. One aspect that I speak to the team on almost on a monthly basis is the infrastructure challenges. Because when I look at how the terrain is in East Africa, or West Africa, or even South Africa, West Africa has a bit of a challenge with road infrastructure, right? So if let's say you land a wind turbine in Lagos and you're taking it to Jos in Plateau, that process to get there, that seems like such a huge challenge. How did other countries solve this challenge, being able to move infrastructure back and forth?
Yeah, it's honestly the same story everywhere. I would say, I mean, I have a business partner who brought in batteries from China into Nigeria. They were being brought to Abuja, and on the way, the car had an accident and the batteries fell into a river, right? And, this is $70,000 worth of batteries. Thank God for insurance. I would say this is not a Nigeria alone challenge. When we were building Lake Turkana Wind Farm in Kenya, which was the biggest wind farm on the continent, roads had to be built. We had that we sized the ports to take the loading of these huge wind turbine blades. Even in South Africa, there's places where they've had to, especially like in areas like in Mpumalanga, where it's a bit more built up, they've had to create certain roads so they can actually bring in this huge turbines.
That requires a lot of coordination
and planning and policy and investment, right? And this is the things that we're always advocating for with NWEC, right? It's not just about finding a great site with great resource, finding the money, but it's also the different layers. And even when you talk to some of the IFC team, there's about 9 layers that you look at. You look at the roads and logistics, you look at the biodiversity in the area, you look at the community, you look at the financing. I mean, there's so many, 9 of them. I can't mention all of them now, but there's so many different elements that you need to look at to be able to ensure the project is bankable and is solid, to be able to construct and go ahead.
That's a lot of coordination, and given that coordinating is so hard because everyone has different incentives, just like the Ministry of Finance, they want to issue waivers for people to bring in panels into Nigeria.
Yeah.
But Customs has also their targets, and they're saying, sorry, we've got a revenue target, and we've got to ensure we make that. So it's really, that's a lot of work, but it's possible, right? Because what we have now, and as we have in Nigeria, I think the average amount of power a day across the country is less than 7 hours.
There you go.
And residential consumption is still 60% of the grid. You can't grow jobs. You can't grow a market with that.
You can't run hospitals with that.
You can't do anything productive. And one of the things we do here at the firm is we have a book club. One of the books we're reading is How Did the World Get Rich?
Okay.
And one of the parts of the book talks about that it wasn't that the West got rich like quite quickly, is that they just kept on having incremental growth over time, and then they were able to scale. So it's really important that we get jobs and really start to build an economy that we can see double-digit growth over a few decades.
Right.
Speaking of that, South Africa was able to move quite quickly on the wind space specifically. And if we draw the parallels of the economy and how their sector grew, you can probably see that there was a correlation. How did they do it?
I think with the renewable sector, I think mentioned before, the REAP, the renewable energy kind of procurement process for South Africa was quite robust. And, in that time, it was quite, an innovative way to procure renewables. They had a system that was clear. Everybody knew when to submit a bid. Everybody knew what the deadline was. Everybody knew where to pay the bid bond to. You weren't paying to random accounts. So there was, an essence of transparency that was taken into account early on to say this is how the sector will run, this is what we're going to use for the next however many years. And of course, even in South Africa, the when you talk to developers there, the industry has changed a lot. But because they had that transparency at the beginning, especially for the first 5 bid windows, you knew when you were going to submit. Literally, you getting the project was based on your innovation and you being able to bring the lowest price to the table. And so companies had to focus on that.
What?
In many other countries, we're now focusing on, okay, who are we talking to? Do we know somebody in the Ministry of Power? Do we know somebody in the Ministry of Energy? Whose mother and father do we need to? That's not we run a sector, unfortunately. Yes, it's doing business in Africa, but it's something that we need to start to slowly remove from sectors like energy, which are catalytic sectors. And so if we're able to look at some of those sectors where we can say, energy is not just for me or you, it's catalytic for education, for healthcare, for food, for agriculture, for everything, then we need to remove any of that opaqueness from the sector. And I think that's really important.
The point you just made around doing business in Africa. Globally, we're seeing that that's kind of how it works everywhere in the world, right?
Actually, yes. Not that I see that with Trump, and I don't want to say Trump on this podcast, but yes, I think we are seeing that, the powers that be, sometimes have an influence.
They drive the conversation.
And yes, and it is affecting the wind sector in America. What we're seeing with and the things that he says, the misinformation that he gives globally. I think it happens, but nonetheless, renewables are still going to be, actually, it's going to be the best year for wind in America, despite everything that Trump is saying. Yes. China installs more turbines than anywhere else in the world. In fact, China installs equivalent to what the whole world installs, despite what Trump is saying. Wind is still growing at record pace, despite what Trump is saying. So regardless of what the misinformation and disinformation is around the technology, it's moving. And it's powering our homes across the world. So we need to now say, okay, you know what? This is not about a political figure who will not be here in 4 years. It's about power for our children, power for our economies, power for ourselves, and our quality of life. And that's what wind and solar and renewables really are bringing to the table.
I know you have to go, so I'm going to ask you two questions in one, and then we can wrap from there. Thank you so much again for stopping by. So the question is, when do you see wind actually being done in Nigeria on the grid? Given that we've got some grid issues to deal with, we've got the state market that could potentially create local grids, so it could make it a little bit easier. Question one. Two is DRE, this distributed renewable energy, is the frontier in Nigeria, and it's how some countries were able to scale very quickly.
Yeah. Does
wind play in that conversation? And then the last question is...
That's 3, Emeka.
Yeah, bonus. By 2030, where do you see wind an actual megawatts on the continent?
Okay. I think for the first question, I see, there's a lot of sector development we still have to do. We're seeing fantastic movement in the energy sector in Nigeria, with the acts coming on board, with states starting to embrace their own energy plans. So I think it's only about 5 to 10 years that we'll see wind coming on the grid. And I think that's good. 5 years is a good amount of time. I mean, from when we spoke, it's already been 3 or 4 years. So another 3 or 4 years, and we'll already start to see this development coming in. And I know some of the biggest players in the world who have told me they're looking at Nigeria as a market that they want to go into. I think 2 or 3 big developers have said, we're watching closely. We're just going to wait and see what that looks like. So in the next 5 years, hopefully, and of course, I would love sooner, but 5 to 10 years when we'll see wind on the grid in Nigeria. I think your question really around the DRE one is a great question, and that's a whole new podcast I think that we can even have. But as I mentioned before, you can have turbines that are as small as 400 watts, and in many places, when you look at things like telecom towers and smaller systems that maybe need 50 kilowatts of power but don't have a large land size, you can actually use turbines. So we have in Nigeria, in Kenya, across Africa, one of our members called Rise Energy has actually installed about 180,000 small turbines working with telecom
180,
towers. 180,000 small turbines. And so
mostly in the Middle East
in
or
Middle East and Africa and Egypt. Egypt is actually their biggest market. The UAE, Kenya, South Africa. And these are powering small communities, schools, buildings, telecommunication. So there is an application around DRE for wind. We need more players within the space, but there is an opportunity there. And I think actually I can mention here that we're working on a pilot project in Plateau where we're going to use wind as for productive use, so whether in irrigation or in commercial use. So hopefully that will be something tangible that Nigerians can go to Plateau or Jos and see what the project is doing in terms of wind powering productive use. And to come to your last question, it was about 2030. I think we will see a lot of wind in Nigeria by 2030. I mean, it's 5 years away, or 4 years now, because there seems to be a drive from the financiers to really get more renewables on the grid. And so if we can, follow the money, then I think renewables will come out on top, and wind will be one of them. We can't do it alone. We can't just do it with solar and batteries. We do need a nice robust mix. And so wind will definitely play a factor into that.
And given that point, that means we need to get donors at this very nascent stage to get involved to support organizations like NWEC. And it seems that we're getting those pushes thanks to the work that you're doing. Yes. Thank you so much, Wangari. This has been a pleasure to have you, and I'm sure we'll have you back before 3 years.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emeka. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor being here.
See you soon.